Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase, one continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we focus on one essential component of the epistemic firewall. In this part 29, we confront a fundamental and often overlooked limit of causal discovery. We define the causal direction non-identifiability protocol. This is the firewall mechanism that enforces humility when we have established a robust causal link between two variables but cannot determine which is the cause and which is the effect. The core revelation is precise. Sometimes causal direction cannot be uniquely inferred from available windows, even with interventions. The correct output is causal equivalence class plus list of tie-breaking interventions if physically possible. The skill you will gain is that of a direction diagnostician. You will learn to recognize when the arrow of causality is ambiguous, to resist the temptation to impose a direction based on prejudice, and to formally declare direction unknown when the data demands it. Our core question is precise. How do we know when we have identified the direction of a causal link versus when the direction is fundamentally ambiguous given our observational capabilities? This question targets a subtle but critical layer of causal inference. We have passed through the previous gates. We have a robust correlational constraint. We have performed interventions that show the relationship is not merely correlational. Poking one variable changes the other. But here lies the subtlety. An intervention on variable x changing variable y does not by itself prove that x causes y in the natural unmanipulated system. It proves that x can cause y, but it leaves open the possibility that in the natural flow of phi, the influence runs the other way, y causes x, or that they are mutually causative, or that both are effects of a hidden confounder in a way that is symmetric under our interventions. If our interventions can be performed equally well on both variables, and both interventions produce a change in the other, then the directionality of the natural process may be non-identifiable from our current experiments. Why is this protocol necessary? The failure mode it prevents is false directionality. We impose an arrow of cause and effect based on narrative convenience, temporal order, or cultural bias, when in fact the system's dynamics are symmetric or the arrow is reversed. This leads to profound errors in model building, prediction, and control. We design interventions targeting what we think is the cause, only to find the system unresponsive because we have the arrow backwards. We build theories of mind that put perception before action, or economic models that put supply before demand, based on unexamined directional assumptions. In holophase terms, we have two derived patterns, A of phi and B of phi. We have a licensed causal rule stating there is a causal link between them. This is represented as A minus B. But is the link AM to B, or BM to A, or AM to B, a feedback loop? The link's directionality is a property we wish to infer. The non-identifiability protocol states that directionality is only identifiable if there exists an asymmetry that can be detected within our licensed window family W class. This asymmetry can be in the omega, k, or v domains. Omega asymmetry. A consistent time lag in response. If changes in A consistently precede changes in B by a fixed interval across many observations, and this precedence is invariant under reasonable interventions, it suggests AB. However, if interventions on B also produce changes in A with the same lag, the direction is ambiguous. K-asymmetry, a structural or spatial asymmetry. For example, if A is a variable defined at a boundary and B is in the interior, influence often flows from boundary to interior. But if the system's equations are symmetric, this may not decide direction. A dynamical asymmetry in how the variables couple. For example, one variable might have a much faster relaxation time. Perturbations to it decay before they can affect the other, suggesting it is the effect, not the cause. The critical point is, if direction changes with our choice of representation or window selection, it's not resolved, it's being forced. We are imposing an arbitrary coordinate system or timescale that breaks a symmetry inherent in the system. Formally, we can define a causal model as a directed acyclic graph, DAG, or a set of structural equations. For two variables, there are two possible directed models, M1AB and M2BA. We ignore the bidirectional case for simplicity, though it is a third possibility. These models are observationally equivalent relative to a set of interventions I if they produce the same joint probability distribution over A and B for all interventions in I. That is, P of AB DOGA is the same for M1 and M2. If this is the case, then no experiment using the intervention set I can distinguish between M1 and M2. The causal direction is non-identifiable. This connects decisively to energy as tally. Energy accounting alone cannot decide direction. Consider two coupled oscillators. They exchange energy back and forth. A perfect energy tally will show energy flowing from A to B in one half cycle and from B to A in the next. If your measurement window, omega, is long enough to average over many cycles, the net energy flow might be zero. You cannot say which oscillator drives the other. They are mutually driving. Multiple directed graphs can share identical tallies inside the window family. The direction is in the phase relationship, which may be unmeasurable if your time resolution is too coarse, an omega window limit. The operational interpretation is found in fields like econometrics and neuroscience, where the problem of simultaneity or effective connectivity is rampant. Two brain regions may show correlated activity. Stimulating region A affects region B. Stimulating region B affects region A. Which is the dominant direction of information flow in a cognitive task? It may be impossible to tell with current non-invasive imaging, a KVAV window limit. The honest answer is to report the effective connectivity as a non-directed link until a finer probe, for example millisecond scale recordings, can break the symmetry. The firewall role, therefore, is that of the direction auditor. When a causal rule G is presented with a specific directional claim, for example, A causes B, you must audit for direction identifiability. You ask, have alternative directional models been tested and ruled out? Is there an omega, K, or V asymmetry that uniquely picks this direction? Would the data be equally consistent if the arrow were reversed? Let us state with crystalline clarity what is allowed and what is forbidden at this gate. What is allowed? You are allowed to discover and license a non-directed causal link. You are allowed to propose a directional hypothesis. However, to license a rule with a specific direction, you must provide evidence that breaks the symmetry. This evidence can be a consistent invariant temporal order, omega asymmetry, that survives interventions. 2. A structural or physical argument, KV asymmetry, that makes one direction impossible. For example, a diode only allows current flow one way. 3. The existence of an intervention that is possible on one variable but not the other. For example, you can inject current into a neuron, but you cannot directly inject a thought. If direction is non-identifiable, you are required to publish the causal equivalence class, the set of directional models that fit the data, and the list of tie-breaking interventions, experiments that, if they were possible, would distinguish the models. What is forbidden? You may not assert a causal direction without testing if the reverse direction is equally consistent with all available data and interventions. Use temporal precedence alone as proof of direction if the time resolution of your windows is coarse relative to the system's dynamics. Claim directionality based on the naming of variables or intuitive appeal. Hide the directional ambiguity when presenting results. What happens when the check fails? The license consequence is clear and formal. Fail, publish direction unknown formally, ban causal direction claims until tie-breaking evidence exists. The rule's license is amended. Its causal direction field is set to non-identifiable. The rule may only be used in context where the direction does not matter or where both directions must be considered. It cannot be used in models that depend on a specific causal ordering. The research agenda is directed towards performing the tie-breaking interventions. Now, we must state the explicit prediction and falsification for the causal direction non-identifiability concept. Prediction, if direction is non-identifiable. All admissible analyses within the licensed windows keep producing at least two directionally distinct models that match omega kV equally well. No matter how you slice the data, run different statistical tests, or use different valid estimation methods, you cannot get a consistent, stable answer for the direction. The estimated direction may flip with small changes in model assumptions or data subsets. The prediction is unstable directional inference. Falsification condition for a claim of non-identifiability. If a new window regime, new omega kV coverage, breaks the tie reliably, then direction was not fundamentally non-identifiable. It was merely unidentified with the previous limited windows. For example, moving from yearly economic data to high-frequency trading data might reveal that price changes consistently precede order book changes, establishing direction. The falsification is resolution by expanded windows. A classic example from physics is the relationship between electric and magnetic fields in Maxwell's equations. In a dynamic electromagnetic wave, the electric field E and magnetic field B are coupled. A change in E induces a change in B, Faraday's law, and a change in B induces a change in E, Ampere-Maxwell law. In a propagating wave, they are mutually causative and in phase. Looking at a snapshot, a K window, you cannot say which causes the other. They are jointly determined by the wave equation. The causal link is non-directed in this instantaneous sense. The direction only becomes meaningful when you consider sources and boundaries, asymmetries in the KV conditions. For example, an accelerating charge here causes a radiation field there. Without those asymmetries, direction is non-identifiable. Let us explore an analogy from the intricate, reciprocal relationship between the health of pistachio orchards in the bulk region and the stability of the local water table. An agronomist and a hydrologist collaborate. They observe a strong causal link. When the water table in the bulk aquifer is high, the pistachio orchards are healthy and productive. When the water table drops, the orchards suffer. Interventions confirm this. Pumping water to irrigate during a drought, an intervention on water available to trees, improves orchard health. Conversely, a massive new orchard planting, an intervention on tree population, leads to a measurable drop in the water table over subsequent years. They have a licensed causal link. Orchard state, water table level. But what is the dominant direction in the natural long-term equilibrium? Does the water table control the orchards? Or do the orchards, through their water consumption, control the water table? This is critical for policy. If WO is dominant, the solution to orchard health is managing the aquifer, recharge projects, regulating industrial use. If O to W is dominant, the solution is managing orchard planting and irrigation efficiency. They perform analysis using yearly data and omega window of 1-year cycles. They find correlations but no clear temporal lead lag. Both variables move together. They try interventions. They can artificially recharge the aquifer, intervene on W, and see O improve. They can cut down a section of orchard, intervene on O, and see W rise slightly. Both interventions work. Their statistical models are unstable. Sometimes one direction fits better, sometimes the other, depending on the decade of data they use. They realize that within their current window family, annual data, regional scale, the causal direction is non-identifiable. The system has a strong feedback loop. Trees consume water, lowering the table. A lower table stresses trees, reducing consumption and allowing the table to recover somewhat. It is a coupled dynamical system. The firewall's protocol is invoked. They are forbidden from publishing a paper claiming water table drives pistachio health, or orchard expansion depletes aquifers, as a unilateral directional law. Instead, they must publish their findings with the direction marked as unknown. Their license rule states: causal link, yes, between orchard state and water table. Direction: non-identifiable given annual regional data. Equivalence class: models WO, OW, WO all fit within uncertainty. Tie-breaking interventions required. 1. A large-scale controlled experiment where water input is decoupled from rainfall. For example, covered plots with drip irrigation from an external source, over many years to isolate OW. 2. High-resolution, subseasonal, monitoring of soil moisture and tree stress to detect which variable moves first during a drought onset, an omega tiebreaker. 3. Studying a similar geological basin with no orchards to establish the natural water table dynamics, a K tiebreaker. The prediction of non-identifiability holds. As long as they only look at yearly regional totals, the directional inference will remain unstable. The falsification condition would be met if they implement the tie-breaking interventions. For instance, if the high-resolution sensors show that water table drops consistently begin months before any measurable change in tree canopy health, that would be evidence for W to O as the dominant initiating direction in a drought cycle. The non-identifiability would be resolved by a finer omega window. In holophase science, the orchard and aquifer are two coupled patterns in the environmental phi field. Their interaction is a dense weave of reciprocal causation. The annual data provides a blurred, low omega picture where the reciprocal pushes and pulls are averaged into a single correlation. The firewall prevents the scientists from picking a direction based on which narrative is more convenient for their department's funding, agriculture versus water resources. It forces them to admit the limit of their knowledge and specify the path to greater clarity. This discipline is a rigorous expression of the episode 11 axioms. Rules do not become real by elegance, consensus, or tradition. They earn a license only by surviving falsification, variation, independence, and scope discipline. The direction audit is a final test of honest scope discipline. It asks, does our license to claim a causal link also include a license to claim its direction? Or is the direction outside the scope of what our current windows can resolve? If the direction is not resolvable, the rule scope must explicitly state direction unknown. And the cardinal rule? When a rule fails, we do not believe harder. We tighten, downgrade, or retire its license. When a directional claim fails the identifiability audit, we do not cling to our favorite arrow. We downgrade the claim to direction unknown. We tighten the rule scope to exclude directional predictions. We retire its use for guiding asymmetric interventions until the tie is broken. The skill you gain from this part is directional humility and strategic probing. You learn to detect the hallmarks of directional ambiguity: unstable parameter estimates, symmetry in intervention results, and feedback loops. You become adept at designing tie-breaking experiments that target omega, k, or v asymmetries. This skill prevents you from building castles on foundations of ambiguous causality. This skill has immediate, vital application. In neuroscience, does increased activity in the amygdala cause fear, or does the conscious experience of fear cause amygdala activation? Interventions like direct stimulation can produce fear, suggesting amygdala fear. But the direction in normal cognition remains debated. It may be a tight loop. The honest stance is often that the directional causality is non-identifiable with current non-invasive measures. Do price changes cause supply changes, or do supply changes cause price changes? The standard model has a direction. Supply-demand shifts move along static curves to set price. But in reality, expectations create feedback. In fast markets, the direction can be ambiguous. High-frequency data might be needed to establish lead-lag relationships. Do CO2 increases cause temperature increases, or do temperature increases cause CO2 outgassing from oceans? A feedback. The ice-core data shows a correlation with CO2 lagging temperature by centuries in some ancient cycles. This initially suggested temperature CO2. But detailed physics and modeling of the full Earth system, including orbital forcing, a clear omega per k asymmetry, broke the tie, establishing that in the current anthropogenic era, the dominant direction is CO2 temperature as the forcing, with temperature CO2 as a reinforcing feedback. The tie was broken by incorporating more omega per kV information, physics of radiation, carbon cycle models. In a generative adversarial network, GAN, the generator and discriminator are in a competitive loop. Does the generator's output cause the discriminator's judgment, or vice versa? It's a mutually causative, coevolutionary process. Assigning a primary direction is meaningless. The system is a coupled dynamic. Finally, let us summarize the epistemic function of this part. Let us crystallize what we have built. We have defined the causal direction non-identifiability protocol. This firewall mechanism recognizes that even after establishing a causal link, its direction may remain ambiguous due to symmetries in the data or limitations of the intervention set. Directional ambiguity can persist jointly in omega, k, and v. The firewall acts as a direction auditor. It blocks the licensing of directed causal claims unless evidence breaks the symmetry between alternative directional models. The explicit prediction for non-identifiable direction is unstable directional inference. Multiple directional models feed the data equally well across all admissible analyses within the window class. The explicit falsification condition is resolution by expanded windows. A new omega, k, or v regime reliably picks one direction, proving the ambiguity was not fundamental. The license consequence is formal direction unknown status. The rule's directional claim is prohibited, and research is directed towards specified tie-breaking experiments. This strengthens the firewall by adding a final layer of causal precision. It ensures that when we speak of A causes B, we have not just evidence of a link, but evidence of an arrow. In the absence of such evidence, we speak with disciplined ambiguity. This protects against the countless errors that arise from assuming we know which way the river flows when we have only seen a stagnant pond. With this protocol, the epistemic firewall's core construction for rule validation is complete. We have built a system that filters candidate rules through syntax, testability, categorical coherence, discovery honesty, data robustness, minimality, assumption rotation, scope mapping, identifiability, fossil detection, correlation causation checks, confounder hunting, minimal intervention standards, and now, directional clarity. A rule that emerges with a full license from this process is a masterpiece of empirical and logical craftsmanship. It is as close to a certain actionable truth about phi as human beings can achieve. This marks the end of our construction phase. We have built the epistemic firewall. Now we must turn to its most critical, ongoing function, diagnosing failure. Rules that are licensed will eventually meet new data, new regimes, and they will fail. This is not a flaw, it is the engine of progress. But we must know how to tell what kind of failure it is. Is the rule wrong, or have we misapplied it? This leads us to the final season of episode 11, how rules fail and how to diagnose what actually broke. Salam and peace be upon you.